All right, guys, let's get today started with the Attitude Question Time debate. I hope you've got your questions ready. Please welcome Attitude's editor and chair of the Student Pride panel. It's Matthew, Todd, and the rest of the team.
Oh, I can hear myself. How exciting. Look at you. Thank you for coming. My name is Matthew Todd. I'm the editor of Attitude. We've got an exciting group of people today, panelists, to answer your questions. I hope you've got lots of questions. I've got some ready in case you don't. Paris Lees is running a little bit late. She's been glamorous, in a cab, doing her hair, being amazing. She'll be here very, very shortly. So let me introduce to you our panel. First off, over here is a media entrepreneur and politician. He was a co-founder and managing director of TV production company Planet 24, where he made his fortune. He is a Labour life peer and works tirelessly in the House of Lords to promote LGBT rights. Please welcome Lord Waheed Alli. Next up is a woman who is the policy director of the Terence Higgins Trust. She is a founder member of Stonewall. When was that? 1989. Yeah, I remember it. I was suffering, age 15. Hard to believe I'm that old, isn't it? So she was a founder member of Stonewall, a general secretary of the International Lesbian and Gay Association, and she was the first LGBT person, openly LGBT person, to speak at the UN on behalf of gay rights. Please welcome Lisa Power. Our next panelist is a psychologist and broadcaster. Hopefully you can do some therapy on me later on, because I need quite a bit. And former basketball player. He is the first openly gay former NBA player and one of the most high-profile gay athletes in the world. Please welcome John Amaechi. Hello, hello. Right on time, always, amazing. Our next panelist is Milo Yiannopoulos. He is a writer and broadcaster, written for The Telegraph and The Catholic Herald. He's also the founder of thekernel.com, which I believe you've just sold.
I did just sell it.
Get you, how glamorous and exciting. He appeared in the media in the run-up to the equal marriage vote, arguing against equal marriage as a homosexual, but changed his mind when he got engaged. Something he wrote about exclusively in Attitude magazine. Free plug, don't hate me. Please welcome Milo Yiannopoulos. Our last panelist is a journalist and activist. She is the first trans presenter on Channel 4 and BBC Radio 1, and she made history last year as the first trans panelist on BBC One's Question Time. Next month, you never guess what I'm going to say now, next month, she joins Attitude. Please welcome the amazing Paris Lees. Hooray! Hurrah! So, let's get straight into it. Be nice, mostly, to me anyway. Who's got a question? Anyone got a question? I have some prepared if you don't have any, but let's see. There must be someone with a question.
It's very difficult to see.
You over there, I can't see because it's quite dark, but... Is there a mic? There's one coming. Okay. Over there. Hello.
Hi. I've got a question about the gay marriage issue. There's been a lot of talk about the positive aspects of gay marriage, so, you know, equal rights and sort of formalizing an institution for gay people, which is great. I mean, I'm a supporter of it. But are you worried at all that we could face the same problems as straight people? Like, you know, divorce rates are going up, there's been a lot of aggro, there's legal battles, and I've heard a lot of lawyers are sort of gearing up for gay divorce. So do you think this has been overlooked in the sort of push for gay marriage, that there are sort of disadvantages as well?
Ooh. Did we all hear that? It's a bit echoing here, but...
So is gay marriage all it's cracked up to be? I mean, given you have the potential for gay divorce, essentially.
Awesome. I can't wait to get divorced. Thank you for bringing me personally down. I'm single. Who would like to answer that? Waheed.
I don't know whether gay marriage will be any different from heterosexual marriage or same, but it is what you make of it, and I think every marriage, regardless of sexuality, has its own challenges and rewards. So I don't think it's anything that is sexuality specific, but I do think everything that follows from marriage will follow from gay marriage. So there will be gay divorce, there will be terrible arguments, there will be a huge amount of counselling services available, and there will be all those lovely people that spend their entire lives together. So I don't see a huge difference, just maybe a bit of learning at the beginning.
I was just going to say to Lisa, we were at the 40th anniversary of Gay Switchboard last night, and it struck me someone was talking about, I don't know if it was you, talking about taking lots of calls over the years from people in same-sex relationships suffering from domestic violence in same-sex relationships.
I think the issue for me is I've never been that big a I think equality is important, but it's a staging post, because I always want to say equal to what? You know, we should all have the right to be ourselves, and in some ways we need to free up heterosexuals as well as get ourselves into things like equal marriage. I think it's absolutely vital that we do it, but let's not pretend that it's the be-all and end-all of our liberation as people. I think it's important, and I have to say I fought for it for other people rather than myself, but I was so touched when I saw people who'd been together for 40 or 50 years and who'd never been able to make a legal acknowledgement of that, finally going through wedding ceremonies. I realised how incredibly important it was for people. But I think that there's going to be more to gay marriage than marriage as we have known it. And I have to say I was present when the Association of British Insurers, an august and rather dry body, was actually having a discussion about whether gay marriage would mean that gay men would settle down and start behaving themselves, and they could insure them as less of a sexual health risk than gay men as a population currently are. And me and the only out gay man in the room just sort of looked at each other sideways and thought, we're not going to tell them, we'll let them find out the hard way.
John?
I mean, I don't think there's a ticking time bomb waiting with marriage equity. I think it's an important stepping stone. I mean, I started off as a marriage and family therapist, in my psychology career, which is hard for many people to believe. But the issues that you see with these families is an abdication of responsibility to each other as partners. It's the idea that the certificate that you get, that the legal acknowledgement you get, will somehow carry you through making absolutely no effort, no compromise, being unwilling to extend yourself in order to maintain that bond between partners. And so those challenges will be identical for gay couples as for straight couples. There won't be any differential there. The issue that we have is that marriage in of itself is struggling because people are not as willing as they should be, perhaps, to make the effort to maintain the relationship, regardless of whether they have a label of marriage on it or not.
Milo is someone who wasn't massively in favour of it before and who now is. Are you engaged, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel about it?
Well, I kind of lost this war, but I think, well, to try to introduce a bit of a point of difference, I mean, one of the virtues of civil partnership, at least, was that it did recognise that gay relationships are in some way quite fundamentally different to straight relationships. They're often based on different things. The sexual politics are different, and things like, you know, the incidences of domestic abuse are different simply because of the different interpersonal politics that are involved. Sorry, I don't know what that means. So I think, you know, one of the virtues of civil partnership was that it was a kind of equal but different. Can I get that?
Yeah, you can. Thanks. That's lovely. Was it was sort of you know, equal but different institution that recognised that gay relationships are not directly equivalent, like gay sex is not directly equivalent to heterosexual relationships. But I think, you know, this battle's sort of pretty much over. I do have some sympathy with things that, you know, Christopher Hitchens and a lot of feminist writers have said. There's something a little bit sad about the domestication of gay life, you know, which was fun because it was subversive.
and because it was naughty and wicked, and because we could all go out and take drugs and have random sex and have this sort of, this sort of very subversive lifestyle legitimized by society because we were a subculture. And once you start to bring a subculture into the mainstream by providing it the same institutions that everybody else has, and of course that's a good thing, broadly speaking, it does rob the culture of a little bit of the sort of mischief that made it special. So I think if I were to try desperately to come up with arguments against gay marriage, which I can't in good faith do anymore, it would be something like that. One is that it was quite nice having a separate but an equal but slightly different institution. And secondly, it's a little bit sad, in a way, as a sort of, from a countercultural point of view, to see, gay culture sort of flattened and domesticated by, becoming part of these big institutions.
But I would have imagined that you would have been in support of, gay relationships being a bit more domesticated, a bit more formal, perhaps. And I know loads of people that's not just,
Well, I don't know. I mean, as someone who's sort of, broadly conservative, but has struggled with my own sexuality, it was about the only thing I did like about being gay. It gave you the license to behave outrageously, and you could, and you didn't have to answer to anybody for it. So I suppose, personally speaking, it seems a bit of a pity to me.
Paris.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when this whole debate started off, actually, and thinking, yeah, God, it's a little bit sad, isn't it? Because I don't know about you, but I enjoy doing things that I know I'm not supposed to, So having that kind of like stamp of, yeah, but then you could kind of look back on when gay guys used to hook up in toilets more often and say, oh, that was more exciting. Like you can kind of sentimentalise it and romanticise it, but it's not really a reason for not having greater social acceptance. And I do think it matters. I mean, for me, the thought of marriage is anathema, and I quite like this idea of everyone just laying around having sex with each other all day, like bonobos or something. But I remember when I got my passport that said that I was female, and it was at a time when I was facing abuse in the street. I felt really isolated at university. I faced family rejection, and actually having the state saying actually who you are is okay really actually meant something to me, as pathetic as that sounds. So of course it's a good thing, and of course there's going to be loads of boring things that go with marriage, not to offend anyone who's married. So yeah.
Just out of interest, can you raise your hand if you've been to a civil partnership in your life? So just a couple of moments, because I remember, 4 or 5, I remember when civil partnerships were coming in, and I think quite a lot of us were quite cynical about it and thought, we don't need a piece of paper, it means nothing, it won't change it. But actually, seeing people celebrate their relationship in front of their friends and family, I found to be a really profound and moving thing. And actually, lots of my friends, even I saw Betty Bourne, who is a kind of very famous artist and writer and performer, and quite, like a radical queer activist. I saw recently on Facebook that he had said, actually it really meant something, it was very moving, and it was kind of profound and meaningful. So I'm all in favour of marriage, personally. Anyway, next question. Has anyone else got a question? This lady over here. Got a microphone, please. Hello.
There's a follow-on question. Do you think there's work still to be done? We seem to have this equal but different. We have marriage and we have same-sex marriage. And we haven't just simply got marriage, regardless of a person's gender. Do you think there's work still to be done?
Paris.
Yeah, definitely. I think that for transgender people, for example, they still have this thing called spousal veto, which sounds really boring, and it is. If a man and a woman marry, and the man, for example, actually feels that they're a woman and wants to change, then they can't actually change their gender legally without their spouse's consent. And up until this legislation that's coming in now, it would have made the marriage void, and they would have had to have got divorced. And actually it would have just been a lot simpler if they'd have just removed gender out of it and said that two people can get married. And actually we see this again and again, needlessly gendering people in the law. And I think that a lot of inequality would be cut out if we didn't do that. And I'm yet to see a really convincing argument for why people need to have a legal gender. And, you know, you don't have to have a legal race, do you, you know? So yeah, it's a bit silly, but lawmakers and politicians love all that, don't they?
Waheed.
I thought you might ask me next. Actually, technically, we spent a lot of time in Parliament discussing this particular issue. And the way that the right, essentially the Christian right, tried to defeat the bill was actually by creating two classes of marriage, one called same-sex marriage and the other called marriage. Technically, even though we talk about same-sex marriage, there are no two classes of marriage. There is only one marriage register. It does not identify you by gender. There is no same-sex marriage. So the point you make is actually we won that point fairly and squarely in the legislation, that the term same-sex marriage is only used in the bill to differentiate itself, so then you can make both of them equal. But technically, yes, there is only one marriage now, only one definition of marriage, which is between a man, a woman and a woman, or a man and a woman. The transgender issue was one that took a lot of time in Parliament, and I actually think we would have got there because I think the Liberal Democrats, the crossbenches, the Labour benches were all agreed in how to move forward with this. But I do have to say that the Conservatives still have a hang-up somewhere deep inside them about transgender issues, and we just could not get them across the line in it. I think they will get there. Don't get me wrong, they're always late to the party, so maybe they will come eventually. But it was that one moment in time we just couldn't get them across the line, for which I sincerely apologise.
Milo, you're a Conservative, it's all your fault.
Well, I mean, it's not. I mean, if we want to go political, then no, the Conservatives are not late to the party, because it was the Conservatives that brought in gay marriage. Like, it was the Conservatives who had the first ethnic minority MP, and the Conservatives who had the first woman Prime Minister. So we can point score if you want. I don't find that very helpful. I think the interesting, you know, the question was, has the battle been won? Is there more to do? And I think for gay people, the answer is yes, the battle has been won. There's nothing left to do. The transgender issue is completely different, and I have nothing in common with people who, you know, who identify as conservatives but don't want to accommodate people's life choices and who, you know, who they choose to be with and which gender they choose to live as. I don't have anything in common with those people.
John, do you have any thoughts about?
The battle is won, I think, broadly. I don't know if that's even on.
We're not hearing you, darling.
This'll do. There we go. I can hear my pleasing baritone. The battle is won. It doesn't mean there aren't other issues to sort out. I mean, not to slightly introduce something on the tangential here, but there are other things that we need to sort out also, which is that when a minority group is under pressure, it tends to ghettoize and it comes together. But in that coming together, it often becomes very homogenous, very the same. People have to dress the same way, they have to look the same way, they have to be the same way. And in a weird way, we suffer from a kind of exclusion when we do that. So there are issues within the gay community, such as it is, that we need to sort out now in order for us to fully take our place at the table, if you like, so that it isn't just a question of us having a different type of inner discrimination, of body fascism and whatever else exists within the gay community. So we've made a huge amount of progress in a very short period of time. I think there are political allies on all different sides, for the most part. But now we need to make sure that we get our own internal house in order as well.
I think Milo wanted to come back.
I just rudely tapped you, because just very briefly wanted to address that, actually, because it's something that really has touched me a lot. One of the problems that I have with, not this organization, I haven't seen any from this, but organizations like Stonewall, for example, sometimes, is they speak for a very small proportion of gay people, but they very often marginalize and ridicule young people who are struggling with their sexuality, who have other things to consider in their lives too. I mean, the worst thing you can possibly be is a right-wing Catholic gay man, according to Stonewall, which is, of course, exactly what I am. And, you know, I'm ostracized by what you might call the gay establishment. I don't get invited to their parties. I don't get, you know, invited to do anything. And the only time I ever get to write in their magazines is when I change my mind. And I know, you know, I'm grateful for the opportunity, but the only time I get airtime is when I toe the party line. And I do think that if we are, you know, if these sorts of organizations are going to be able to speak credibly for the gay community, they need to speak to everyone. Because the real worry is somebody who's growing up, you know, from a religious background, who's struggling with their sexuality. Their religion says their sexuality is problematic, but they feel that they're attracted to the same person, or they feel like they were born into the wrong gender or whatever. We tend to mock and to ridicule, well, the gay establishment tends to mock and ridicule anyone who's religious, anyone who dares to vote Tory. And I have real problems with that. And it speaks to what you were saying, really. This sort of very homogenous, exclusive sort of elite of sort of gay media types who don't really permit or allow any kind of dissenting opinion, I think is the single major challenge for the gay community for the next 10 years, because most of the civil rights battles are over and have been won and are history. And I have real problems with, you know, as a gay man who has struggled with things in the past, being totally alienated by many of the people that are put in front of you as, you know, gay representatives. You think about how many people vote right-wing. What, half the countries? That's half the kids that you're not representing, you know, when you don't provide a platform for those points of view. Religious people, I only know about Catholic stats, but there's 6 million Catholics in this country. How many kids is that the gay establishment completely alienates and doesn't help at all? So I have problems with that. I was sorry to interrupt, but you know, it's a subject I feel very strongly on, and I think you're absolutely right. And I would love to see more work done on that than policing language in the playground.
Lisa, is this working? Lisa, hello.
Hello.
Hello. Lisa, obviously you haven't worked at Stonewall for a long time, but you could argue that THT is part of the gay establishment. Do you think that Stonewall and organisations like the THT marginalise and ridicule people who are religious or who are right-wing? I think I know what you're going to say.
Absolutely not. And I can tell you that everybody always thinks that organisations like Stonewall belong to the other side because they're relatively neutral. Now, there have been times when they haven't managed to do that, but actually on the whole, over the whole of their history, I think Stonewall have actually played a pretty good bat in managing to get most parties on board most of the time. And we are further down the road around LGBT rights in this country, and I will take off the T because it is Stonewall, and we all know the T is silent in Stonewall, and that's got to change. But they've got us further down that road than most other countries, and I think we need to acknowledge that. And you do that by being everybody's friend, but that means everybody's a bit suspicious that you're somebody else's friend and not theirs. So I think that it's very easy to throw brickbats at someone like Stonewall or someone like Terence Higgins Trust, but they play a really useful role. My issue at the moment is actually what I'm worried about is that much as I do love them, organisations like Stonewall have made equality the absolute mantra. And for me, the issue is I have arguments with a lot of people who think that we are equal and therefore we don't have any special problems and we mustn't admit that we've got any special problems. And what I see is a community which struggles because of stigma, because of the shit we've had for generations as LGBT people. We have substance problems, we have mental health issues, we have a whole load of stuff around our issues around self-worth, but we have a great deal of trouble admitting to those most of the time because we have to pretend we're as good as straight.
Waheed.
Milo, I wanted to address you directly because I don't think that I don't have a problem with individual Catholic, Christians, people of faith, yes, who are gay. But you have to understand, it is not us that picked the Catholic Church as the target. It was the Catholic Church that picked us as the target. It is the Catholic hierarchy that attack us for our very being. They are the people that call us sinful. They are the people that call us wicked. They are the people that attack our lifestyles. And for us to stand up and say, we do not believe you are right. We are equal in the sight of the law. We believe that God thinks us equal, cannot be offensive. And if you take offense for that, when we stand up and defend our position, yeah, and claim that somehow we are picking on Catholics who are gay, I think that is a misinterpretation.
Okay, I just heard you say that wasn't your point. What was your point? Because I want to. I don't want to beat up on you, but just to summarise, because the very last thing that you said was that's the single most important issue for me, not what we call kids in playgrounds. So what's the most important issue? Just really simply.
Yeah. No, super simply, I think, it's fine to say these organizations are neutral. Obviously they're not. You read any of these publications, you read Pink News, whatever, favorite thing, bash the Tories, bash the churches, whatever. I mean, everybody knows this is true, and there's no point pretending otherwise. The whole of, mainstream gay culture, is enormously left-wing. My problem is it alienates young people who really need the help. Stonewall doesn't have much left to do in terms of policy or politics anymore, but what it really can do is help young people who are struggling with, for example, reconciling their religion with their gender identity, or recognize, and Stonewall doesn't help those people and doesn't speak for those people, and that's what it should be doing now. And that was my point. It wasn't about whether we've attacked, whether gays are attacking Catholics or Catholics are attacking gays. That's a dead end. No one's ever going to win that argument. My point is, if you're an organization that is supposed to help gay people, it doesn't help to constantly put people on platforms, on TV shows, in your conferences, and in the publications in your orbit that mock and deride and criticize 50% of people who feel so totally alienated from the mainstream of gay culture that you don't represent them and you can't help them. That's my point.
I think that, just to say that the gay community not being welcoming of people from backgrounds that are not welcoming is kind of, I don't really know how you work that out. Surely it's the backgrounds that those people come from, which is the problem. But for me, it was the final point that you made, saying that this is the most important issue. I don't think it is. I think the biggest important issue that gay people and trans people in this country face is bullying in schools. I was bullied really violently at school, and I've said this again, and it's not to kind of detract from other marginalised groups' struggles, but if you're coming from an ethnic minority, it's less likely that you're going to go home and you're going to get abused by the people in your family as well, whereas as LGBT people, our families might actually be the biggest source of anxiety in our lives, and that was certainly true for me. I was scared to go to school and I was scared to come home, and yes, I think we need to help adult LGBT people, but it's much easier to prevent people becoming damaged than actually healing damaged adults. So there's lots of work to be done, and ultimately we're all grown-ups. Do you know what I mean? Like, we can deal with our issues, we can make our own choices, but for me the biggest important issue is kids, because they don't have any power and they don't have a choice to protect themselves.
I think we're absolutely agreed on that, but maybe what we haven't talked about is how that's accomplished. Because what I see from organisations like Stonewall is ban the word gay. Well, what happens when you put something in front of a kid and say you can't do this? They do it more. It's obvious what's going to happen if you turn gay into this totemic kind of banned word. Kids are subversive. They're going to use it more. It's putting a target on gay kids' backs, and it's not removing it. And I think just trying to police language is the most sort of trivial, pointless way of addressing bullying, and that's all I see from Stonewall.
Yeah, but under that logic, then you wouldn't ban anything. You'd let people call people racist names. You wouldn't have any rules because, well, kids won't obey. Well, surely we need to stop racist bullying, homophobic bullying. We have to try, don't we?
There's a freedom of speech argument that says that people should police, the kids should police each other, and teachers should police kids, and that children will come to learn through the punishment that they get. Sorry, there is an argument that kids should be allowed to use whatever words they want to begin with, and they're going to very quickly learn what's acceptable and what's not, because they're going to receive the approbation of their peers. I think that's far more effective than holding up targets like you can't say gay, which just make them so juicy and attractive for kids to use.
But they made a really quite well put together film that went into nuance into the issues and how this makes the other. No, because it's in channel.
Don't call kids
It's in classrooms.
Well, yeah, don't call kids
taken
gay.
a film by Ricky Beadle-Blair into classrooms. That's not policing language. It's just educating people.
Okay, let's move on to another question, because we need to get more questions. This gentleman down here in the front row. Has anyone got a microphone? The amazing microphones that sometimes work and sometimes... Oh, this... Let's go for this lady here. She's got the microphone. You ask your question, then we'll come to you next.
Hello. Hi there. As part of the LGBT community and a trainee therapist, my concern is that there's a real inequality within this acronym of LGBT as a collective group of individuals, but there isn't the same support networks out there, and there aren't the same there isn't the same media representation. And I was wondering what the panel thinks, in particular, John as a psychologist in Paris, how you think that the community as a whole, how we can support each other, especially within schools, to make sure that we are seen as a collective group to be strong. And if you think that lies within the community, is that responsibility?
I guess you're kind of asking, how can we have an LGBT community? A community is talked about a lot, isn't it?
Because gender and sexuality are not codependent, but we are put together as a collective group, and we stand stronger together, and we have the similarities of stigma and being a minority. So how can we support each other?
Okay, let's go to Lisa for this one.
I actually came out in a small town, well, relatively, Lancaster. I don't know if there's anybody here from Lancaster Uni, but it was a small town comparatively, and we all stuck together. We had one disco on a Friday night, and it wasn't just the LGBTQ disco, it was everybody from the Hells Angels through to the local drag queens. It was absolutely everybody. And we learnt to stick together. And when I came down to London in the mid-70s, I discovered that everybody was separatist. And all the lesbians had just left all the mixed organisations to found separatist organisations. Transgender people didn't stick their head above the parapet at all, hardly. And I joined what was then Gay Switchboard. And we realised, if you were on Gay Switchboard, you knew that all human life was out there. But in a big town, people didn't have to stick together. And I guess I've never lost that small town value that says, if they ever come for us with machine guns, they're not going to ask us whether we're L, G, B, or T before they stick us up against the wall. Our enemies don't like any of us, whatever we label ourselves. So I kind of do have that basic tendency to stick together and not to separate out. And I always do want to support everybody along the spectrum. And I think in some ways we've had the privilege of being able to separate out much more in the big cities and in the bigger movement. But we should never forget, people don't like us for all of us who we are together. And that's why I have real trouble whenever anybody drops the T or the B or whatever. I don't care what we label ourselves, we're all queer.
Waheed, do you feel there's a gay community?
I think that gay men and lesbians have learnt to work together in a really constructive way. I mean, these are different and disparate groups of people that have come together. I have to say, I think the B and the T have got the rough end of the deal on every single bit of legislation and everything we've ever done. And I think we need to help and be better at the B and the T. But let me say this, it's not a natural alliance, and there are lots of things you can talk about in terms of lesbians and gay men and what we may or may not have learned from each other and what we've yet to learn from B and T. But it is an alliance that I have loved every minute of. It has made my life richer from knowing those groups of people, and I am so glad that I was in that alliance because I think it has made for a much better set of organisations.
John.
I struggle with this because it just seems to lack any kind of nuance when we have this conversation about community. What I have in common with any of you will be disparate and different entirely from issues of sexuality. It'll be Doctor Who or something equally geeky and ridiculous. and wonderful. And when you look at gay people, if you try and create a Venn circle around gay people that is big enough to include everybody, it's an almost meaningless label. The larger the number of people you try and incorporate in a label, the more meaningless that label becomes. If we really want to do something that creates community, that will happen across borders that go beyond bisexuality and transgender. It'll go across borders that will make us right now immediately feel uncomfortable, because it will be people who will not be apparent natural allies. Real progress in organizations, whether they be societies or groups within society, comes when people realize that what we're not doing is fighting the homophobia monster here, and then the transphobia monster, and then the biphobia monster. Real progress comes from understanding that racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, all these other evils are simply different heads of the same monster. They are a hydra. And that community comes when people stop trying to hack away at the head that most concerns them whilst being bitten in the arse by the other 15. Community comes when people say, I recognize the nature of the monster we're fighting now, the centralized, common ignorance and fear that drives these monsters. And we attack that wherever we see it. So not just when we see it for ourselves in the gay community, not just when we see it with our trans friends, not just when we see it, but when we see it when immigration is discussed, when we see it when we talk about other issues of faith that, for example, for me as an atheist, I find uncomfortable. But that's when we get community, not when we try and decide we're going to segment off society and make this little bit a community. It's harder work than that. If it were easy, then we'd really have it and not just talk about it.
It's such a complex issue, isn't it? I think that I kind of hate coming to things like this and saying, oh, everyone's dreadful. But I do think that there is an issue with transphobia on the gay scene. Some of the worst transphobia that I've experienced in the past few years since I transitioned has happened in gay bars and stuff. I remember I was in a bar in Brighton with my boyfriend, and I walked in, and this dude shouted, "Oh, look, it's straighties, spot 'em a mile off." And then his mate kind of turned around and looked at me, and then looked at me in the face and went, "Really? Are you sure about that?" And that's not a lone incident, really. And I had a friend who had a really tough time at London Pride a few years ago, and she just basically had people coming up to her, you know, gay guys, lesbians, and just saying, you know, you look awful for a drag queen. You know, you're not a real lesbian. What are you doing here? And all this kind of stuff. So I think this idea of community is lovely, but I'm not sure if trans people experience it. But saying that, you know, the queer community and the gay scene has been a really wonderful place personally to develop, and you know, I think we do need that, but I think it's about broadening it out as well, isn't it? Because, like John says quite rightly, it's many different heads of the same beast, and I don't just think it's LGBT. I think it's people from different ethnic minorities, people with mental health issues, people living in poverty. Essentially, I think we all kind of know, don't we, that we're being done over by like the rich white guys. You know, they're still the ones that have the power. They're still the ones, you know, when you go to companies and stuff, the man in charge is usually a rich white man from a good background, and I'd like to see all of us pulled together. Sorry, am I offending you again? I'm just shooting from the hip here. I'm sorry. Okay. So yeah, I think we should all pull together.
Milo, you've said that you didn't feel part of the gay community. How could the LGBT community have made your experience easier.
I mean, look, my experience of this is the people who preach tolerance the most are very often the most intolerant. You know, and I think your experiences in gay bars prove that. You know, they say all the right things at these sorts of events, and then they're vile to each other and vile to other people. You know, at night with a few drinks inside them. You know, the way that gay people treat lesbians, horrendous, and vice versa, horrendous. I think you know, I think transgender people probably get the roughest end of the deal from what I know. I'm not an expert on these things. Sounds like they do. Speaking from a personal point of view, you know, I kind of made the point earlier, there are certain things that you are and certain things that you are born into that create, you know, psychological challenges for you. And to be written off, as I have been every time I've gone on television, as some self-loathing gay Tory, to be mocked and to be criticized, is unacceptable for a community or for a, you know, movement, for an establishment, whatever, that preaches tolerance, that is all about people being accepted for who they are. And my personal experience of the majority of gay organizations has been absolutely awful.
John?
I just want to throw this out there, that tolerance is not about immunity from mockery. Mockery is a very valuable tool when powerful people do and say stupid things. That mockery is required sometimes. Tolerance is not about never being insulted. Tolerance that is not what we're talking about. There are, you know, of the thing that you said at the very beginning, which I think was the thing that triggered some ire in me, was you talked about how the hardest thing to be is a Catholic gay man, and well, I've got to tell you, no, there's just a million things harder than that. I mean, just for an example, many of the women here, whether they be lesbian or otherwise, the problem they're really going to face is the idea that they're going to go into a workplace that is entirely hostile to their success. Settle down back there. And so there's lots of things harder than being that. And we've got to be aware of our privilege. Yes, tolerance, sometimes we have failures in etiquette. But the truth is that when people say and do stupid things, especially those stupid things that are immensely harmful to young people, words that are spoken by powerful people that are magnified by their status, so that when they hit children, they are left breathless. They deserve the mockery that they get from whatever political perspective they come from.
Yeah, but we're not talking, I mean, what does kids more harm? Somebody saying gay to them in the playground, or them wrestling with their sexuality and being totally alienated by the journalists, by the celebrities, and by the charities that are supposed to be looking out for them. That's my point.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. It was you down here, wasn't it? Has got the mic to this guy here, please. I think it's this guy here.
Hi. Following on from the discussion about transphobia in the gay community, obviously being trans myself, I know that trans gay people often face specific challenges within the gay community, such as not being taken seriously if they come out as gay, being otherwise marginalized. What steps should gay press such as Attitude Magazine, Diva, etc. take to make sure trans people who are gay are included in their magazines and visible in their magazines and in the gay mainstream media?
Oh God, it's a question for me. Paris, you answer first and then I'll say something.
No, I was just going to say employ me.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really happy that Paris is joining the magazine. I mean, it's a really complicated question because, I mean, we had this discussion a couple of weeks ago, didn't you? You were looking through the magazine, you were saying you thought, I tried to mention trans things as much as I can in the magazine. I tried to be as inclusive as possible because I'm also aware that, you know, there's lots of people who are HIV positive who might be reading the magazine, and sometimes the kind of messages in the gay press can just be like, to people who are HIV negative, and don't actually speak to people who are positive. So I try to be as inclusive. I guess there is a wider problem. I feel like we are probably 20 years behind where kind of lesbian and gay rights are with maybe trans issues and bi issues, and I mean, I'm really happy that you're joining the magazine. I love you. And I'm excited because, you know, you're going to be provocative and stir things up. And what's your view on trans representation in the gay press generally? You were at Gay Times for a couple of years.
I was, yeah, and I'm really excited about joining Attitude, and I really enjoyed my time at Gay Times. It was really fun, and I'm really pleased that Diva's a sponsor actually, because Diva is one of the few magazines that actually gets trans stuff right, and they get a lot of stick sometimes, and I think that sometimes the people that you expect to be better are the people that we criticise the most. So people will be more likely to criticise Channel 4 News for getting something wrong, or Pink News for getting something wrong, than the Daily Mail, because you just expect it from them. And I don't think that I don't think that the answer is just employing me. I'd like to see lots of people writing for the gay press and the mainstream press, and I don't really know how we go about doing that, because I think that for trans people in particular, they've got so many issues to be dealing with and struggling with, and having to sort out documentation and things like that, that just kind of, you know, functioning as a person, it can be quite difficult, let alone building a career for yourself in the media. But I think we're going to see that change, and I think that we're seeing more and more people who are trans that are getting a voice in the media, and I think that, you know, being gay has changed hugely within the last 30 years. I mean, how many gay people do we know that work in the media? You know, it's run by gay people. So I just think that if people want to see a change, they need to go out there and have something to say and get their voice heard. But I do think that it's very depressing when the gay press in particular gets it wrong, because you do expect better, and you think, God, if these people can't get it right, then who's going to get it right? And it really depresses me to see magazines like, is it G2, G3? I've never read it. Employing Julie Bindel and people like that, and that really kind of makes me feel quite crap to think that these people that don't believe I have a right to exist, you're happy for them to come and talk in your magazine, and they're taken seriously. So, but I think it's going to change.
Lisa, we were talking last night at the Switchboard event about how do you specifically include bisexual people and also trans people, and Switchboard was saying that they've just suddenly got 2 trans people who are volunteers. They've not really had many trans people there before. What's your view on how can we be more inclusive?
Well, actually, they'd lost their sense of history, because I was there when the first trans volunteer joined Switchboard, and Switchboard's view then I thought was quite pragmatic. Switchboard didn't see itself as a trans organisation, it saw itself as a lesbian and gay organisation, but if you were trans homosexual, then you had just as much right to be there as anyone else. So the first trans woman who joined was lesbian identified, and she was amazing. And yes, it caused waves in the organisation. It caused waves from some of the other lesbians, and as she rather trenchantly pointed out, she'd been a lesbian since she was 15, which was more than some of them could say. You know, the issue for me is partly about organisations are never welcoming when you're the first 1 or 2 in. It's about some of us being quite tough sometimes about getting in somewhere. But I have to say that as a lesbian in the 80s, I was given a lot of support by gay men who knew that it should not be a single-sex community, who knew that things like Switchboard needed lesbians, and then we all knew that Switchboard needed people who were trans and people who were bi. And actually, on Switchboard, the people who had the hardest time for the longest time were people who were bisexual, because if you weren't lesbian, gay, pure, God, you could have a hard time. And people were, you know, quite hunted at times. There was a special general meeting held once to discuss chucking me and somebody else off because we hadn't been sufficiently pure in our behaviour. These kinds of fights always happen, but it's up to all of us to change that. It's up to all of us. And it's up to the gay press now to be looking for the diversity of our community and encouraging those voices. And I don't know you very well, Paris, but you strike me as the sort of woman who's going to pull other women up with you, pull other trans women up with you, and not let people get stamped on. And I think that's what's important, is we have to fight for a space, but then we have to widen that space out and get others alongside us.
We've only got about 10 minutes left.
I've got to correct you there,
sorry,
I'm just out for myself.
Sorry, say that again, Paris?
I'm not really. I'm out for myself, I just wanted to correct you there.
We've only got about 10 minutes left. Let's just see if we get some more questions. You down here with the thing in the front, yes. Yes, you. Who tried to take a picture? I'm sorry, I was doing my questions at the time. We'll do it later.
What are your opinions regarding bi-erasure in like national media, general media, and do you think it will ever change?
Sorry, say that again.
Bi-erasure, what are your opinions on it, and do you think it will ever change?
It's very echoey in here.
Fair enough. Sorry.
It's all right.
What are your opinions on bi-erasure in national general media, and do you think it will ever change?
I can't hear you.
Thank you, Paris.
Oh, sorry, bi erasure, as in like bi people not being visible in gay culture generally. Waheed, what's your views on bisexual people not being visible amidst gay culture? Do we have any bisexual MPs in the House of Commons, or do we have any specific, MPs who are openly bisexual rather than openly gay in the House? Actually, we do, don't we? The Lib Dem. Sorry, you speak.
I think the two things are connected. In the national media, I think great progress was made for gay men and lesbians through visibility and portrayal, not in the gay press, but in the broader press. And when you look at things, whether they're Will and Grace, whether it's Graham Norton, whether it's Paul O'Grady, Alan Carr, when you look at the mainstream adopting, you look at Coronation Street, you look at EastEnders, you look at the kind of characters that are portrayed, they do more than anything else to move the public. And so when you look at where do we need to target and campaign to actually get better portrayal and better visibility, be it for bi people, be it for transgender, I think we have to do a lot more work with some of those broadcasters. I don't think they would object. I think we just need to be better at putting our case. And I think they've got used to us asking and them responding. Not everybody, and it doesn't all happen at once, but I think it is possible to break through genre by genre on television, particularly to be able to get a better portrayal.
Can I jump in there if I promise to be super brief?
Yeah, please.
I think, I'll promise to be quick. One is, the gay community has to accept some responsibility for the way that gay people are portrayed. And the reason I say this is, the gay role models that are on television, all of the ones you cited, I think are pretty ugly. Ugly gay role models that do not represent how most people behave, how most people are, the way that most people want to be thought of. That's not what I want people to think of, when they think of gay people, because I don't want, I'm not, I don't identify with any of these people, right? I think they're very exaggerated, caricatured.
Who are we talking about? Like comedians, like Alan Carr and people like that?
Gay characters in sitcoms, comedians, chat show hosts, they're all of a very few kind of archetypes, and I don't identify with those. I think they're very exaggerated stereotypes of a particular kind or two particular kinds of gay men. I don't particularly like them, but the gay community, celebrates the hysterical. It celebrates the brash and the loud and the pride marches and the floats, and these people are heroes and brave and all the rest of it. So what shows up on TV? What we present to the world. We don't present to the world normal people who happen to like other men. We present to the world drag queens, pink glittery floats. And all these sorts of things, and so I have some sympathy.
There's one going past, isn't it?
No, I mean look at the color this room is decorated, and I've never been to a gay event that's not pink and purple. I mean, that certainly doesn't. I mean, okay, fine, all right, but. But I totally take that as well. I look like an idiot. I'm a man. I've come here in pearls and pink. That means I don't necessarily have the right to whinge when I see really bad role models on TV. But I think it's also true that the gay role models we have are almost uniformly terrible.
this is why people find your rhetoric distasteful. It isn't your politics. It isn't your politics. It's the fact that the very thing that we're trying to avoid, which are these weighty stereotypes that squash people into two-dimensional caricatures, is exactly what you do. When you talk about Alan Carr, no. When you talk about Alan Carr and these other characters, who I'm not wildly familiar with, I'm an old man. My kids are older than most of you. So I don't know them particularly well. But they represent and have done in television for a long, long time, since Larry Grayson and before, what straight men who ran television found comfortable. And so naturally they were the first people to enter the kind of public zeitgeist. And naturally they were embraced as being the first role models out there. But I also, every morning that I listen to Radio 4, because I'm old, and I hear Hugh, and some of the other LGBT people who are on Radio 4, at least lesbian and gay people, a smile cracks my face because I recognize that there is also that representation. When the hot guy who does ITN weather comes on, I recognize that, I don't know, actually he may not be out. All right, regardless. But he is now. I smile a little bit there. There's another person who's representing us. We are very different, and we aren't all brash, we aren't all whatever, but some of us are, and we have to embrace the idea that some of us are a bit different and a bit wild. And when you're dull like me, sometimes having a bit of pink and a bit of craziness and a bit of drag and a bit of something else is a welcome relief to my stoicism.
Let's take another question. Let's take another question. You over here, yes. Is there a microphone? Amazing, thank you. Hello.
Hi, this is a question for Paris. You recently wrote a piece questioning whether trans roles in movies and TV shows should go to trans actors. And one of the responses that this had was, well, there aren't that many trans actors, so, you know, just because you're trans doesn't mean, oh, that directors owe you the role. Would you say this is a valid argument, or that it's just another way of like denying opportunities for trans people?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a straw man, really, because I wasn't saying, you know, that trans people just deserve to be given roles just because they're trans. But let's face it, we do have some really good acting talent out there, and there are so many different considerations when it comes to casting. You know, age, height, race, all these different things, and those things do matter in casting, because you're casting a role, and there's room for leeway with some of those things if you find the right person. But I think that my response to that is that what is the film industry doing actually to encourage acting talent? And I think that it's like so many things in life, it feels like something that trans people can't do, because we've never really done before. There's never really, I mean, there's been one or two. I'm thinking of like The Crying Game, although that I don't think the person who played that was a transgender woman, but was a guy who was gender non-conforming. But you know, I'm not saying that trans people should only be able to play trans roles either, but for me, I just think it's very easy when you've got someone like Julie on Coronation Street, and she's great. She's played a blind one. I think she's a friend to the trans community. But I just think my kind of test in my mind is, well, what would my mum think of this? My mum's your average kind of woman, you know, shops at Marks and Spencer's, Tesco's, reads the Mirror, that kind of thing. And I know that she sits and watches Coronation Street, and she can think, oh, yeah, she's meant to be transsexual, isn't she? You know, she's meant to be that transsexual one, if she ever really thinks about it. But it's not the same as actually seeing a real transgender person on your screen and being confronted with that. And people say, well, you know, that's like saying that, you know, you can always tell, or that trans people don't pass. And my argument would be, well, why can't we just see trans people passing on screen, you know, and why can't we see trans people that don't pass on screen and see us in all of our diversity? So that's something that I'd like to see more of, and it just annoys the hell out of me, because I think that every time we have this debate, and it does keep coming up again and again when a new film is out, it's just an excuse for people that I actually think are quite bigoted to pile in and come up with these kind of strawman arguments, when really, which is what they're saying is, we don't like trans people and we don't want them to have anything, and they're not really engaging with the issues.
Let's just take one last question. Hello. I was trying to be equal and looking for someone in the back, but you looked very keen.
How can we increase the conversation on issues like body image and gay and bi men, mental health issues in our community, and all these things that we don't always see but are very prevalent in our community?
Waheed, let's go to you. Do you have any about how can we show a wider variety of body images and talk about body issues and things like that? I think about gay culture just shows a lot of washboard stomachs, doesn't it, and all the rest of it. Do you have a? We're saying that's a problem, aren't we? That's your view that that's not a good thing. Yes, it's that's up for debate. I think it's a problem, yeah, but I'll say something about that in a minute. But
I suppose there are two answers to that. The first is the strategy for making sure that everybody does whatever they're supposed to do. But the other bit is physician, heal thyself. It is something very deep within our psyche as a group of gay people, our own sense of what good looking is and what kind of bodies we want our partners to have and what kind of bodies that we want to have. And therefore the portrayal comes from within, and I think we have to be much more accepting of a community of a broader range of people. You only have to walk outside and go around the stands to see the kind of images that are being projected by us, for us, and that we're buying into. So if there's anywhere to start, I would start right here at home, and we should be showing more images to ourselves that we find appealing rather than trying to change anywhere else.
Lisa.
Well, as you can see, I've always been worried about body image. I mean, fuck it, I like food. Stuff it. I think that there is a deep atavistic desire in most people, and it's nothing to do with being LGBT, but actually it's worse for us because there's a big way in which we start off thinking we don't belong. So we need to belong, and we need to feel like we're like others. And I have had plenty of gay male friends who've had their own style as they started to grow up and come out, and who've had to tame that style in order to get laid. I had a friend who was a lovely, lovely queen, and he liked florals and floaty things, and this is in the late 70s, but he didn't get laid till he grew a moustache and started wearing an army bomber jacket. And it really pissed him off, but he'd rather have sex than florals. So, you know, I think that we need to challenge that stuff, but I think it goes back to the stuff we almost started off on, which is, do we all want to really be the same as everybody else, or do we want to fight for our right to be different and to be ourselves and find out what ourselves is? And I very much want that. And what I see at the moment is, particularly for gay men, but it's also echoed in some other bits of our culture, a real split between the people who are going off into equal marriage and trying to be as heterosexuals in some ways, and the other, and this is gay men largely, that I see down in Vauxhall taking as much drugs and drink as they can because that's their image of being the right kind of gay man. I think doing anything that you think you've got to do in order to be gay or lesbian or bi or trans is wrong. And I think we all need to think, what are we? What are we really? Are we going to be happy being someone else? Because I didn't come out as a dyke in the 70s to conform to anybody else's view of what I ought to be.
So I would add this challenge then as well. So if you really want to do something about the body fascism out there, especially in the gay community, then let's do something. Yes, we can demand that magazines, that when the naked image comes out, that there's a few more bears and few more people like me who are long past having 4% body fat, and I'm not doing it. But also there's a personal responsibility. How many times do we go out places where we observe our friends looking at the person who comes in last season's stuff and getting ripped to shreds? How many times do we go out to places and watch as we look at one partner who we think is attractive with another person who we don't think is, and we rip that relationship to pieces? So why don't we take some personal responsibility with this right now, from right now? It's not about telling whoever the bloke is without his shirt on out there advertising something that he shouldn't be here. But there is an element of this personal responsibility that's much harder. It's harder when we suddenly have to stand out in the crowd in our slight inebriated haze and say, you know what? No, not okay. That person decided to take their shirt off and they don't fit your idea of what hot is. Tough. Don't look. That's a personal thing that we can, if you're really serious about changing this, sometimes it's not about policy, sometimes it's not about legislation, sometimes it's just about us giving that face that says we totally disapprove of what you've just done now and you're buying the next round.
I'm going to speak first. I'm the magazine editor. I'm the magazine editor. This is really a really complicated question, and we are running out of time, but I'll be as quick as I can. I get quite a lot of flack at Attitude. Oh, you always put hot men on the cover with a shirt with their pecs out and things. And actually, quite a lot of the time we don't do that. But I was around with someone on Twitter about it the other day, and I was actually sending them all the covers in the last 18 months where we had James Franco in a shirt or Daniel Radcliffe in a shirt, and lots of different people. People often only see that. Also in the and actually when we do not put people with their chests out on the cover, you guys don't buy the magazine. I was at an event like this probably about 5 years ago, and someone said to me, you'd never put Stephen Fry on the cover, would you? So I did put Stephen Fry on the cover, and it was the lowest selling issue since the one before, which was Beth Ditto. And I found it really sad because I adore Stephen Fry and I adore Beth Ditto, and I still try to do those covers for the magazine. My boss screams at me, you've just put someone on the cover that sold really badly, why did you do that? And I was like, well, it's body issues and it's really important to... And he's like, what? Shut up, just make me more money. That's the sad fact of the capitalist society we live in. I talk about the fact that I have got a big fat belly quite a lot. I write about it in the magazine. In Attitude specifically, I've made a point of, we have a spread at the back of the magazine, I don't know if any of you guys read it, called Real Bodies, where every single month we have a real person in their shorts, shot in a way which isn't sexualized. It's just, we've had older people, younger people, taller people, shorter people, larger people, talking about their bodies and things. I was the only magazine editor. There was a House of Commons inquiry about airbrushing and body images in magazines. They invited all the magazines, all the biggest magazines, GQ, Elle, all these magazines. I was the only national magazine editor that went to it, and I talked about what we're saying now. And it is very frustrating that, that's right, there was a gay MP, I can't remember his name now, but he said, you say you have real people in the magazine, but they're always really hot real people. Actually, there isn't. We do a dating thing in the magazine with two normal people, average people like myself. So it is a problem amidst gay culture, but it's also a problem amidst wider culture. I certainly have to say, when I look through free magazines on the gay scene, when it's saunas, sex, clubbing, this, that, rent boys, escorts, this, that, the other, none of which we do. We don't do clubbing, we don't do escorts, we got rid of all our adult chatline ads in Attitude. I've been rejected the most on the gay scene by other gay men, and if I go on Grindr, I'll be on there for about 2 years trying to get someone to reply to me. It's a complicated thing that we are a very sexualized culture. And I think for me, the wider issue is that we all need to be nicer to each other. And I think we'd all have an easier time if we did that. It's very complicated. I'm actually writing a book, and I'm going to be talking about this specifically. That'll come out hopefully soon. Milo.
I just feel, I feel sorry that you have to be so defensive. I just feel sorry. I feel sorry you have to be so defensive about it. I don't see what's wrong with it. Your job is not to police other people's self-esteem. If someone's not happy with their body, they can go to a gym. I mean, we should just sort yourself out. Everybody wants to, you say it's like, this awful capitalist society, but people want to look at, at attractive bodies. So when you put them on the cover, the magazine sells. Why be apologetic about it? It's what you do. It's your business. Like, I don't know. I feel for you having to kind of make these arguments, which I think are basically pointless, because a small minority of people who aren't happy with themselves want to whinge about the fact that they don't look like the people in the magazines they buy. Well, go sort it out then. Most people want to look at that.
Oh, I wish I was going to say something more popular so we could end on an applause or something, but I kind of I'm somewhere kind of here. You know, I work in magazines, and the fact is, when you put someone looking conventionally attractive on the cover, not wearing very much, people go and buy it. So I think we've got two different things going on here, which is what we say we want and what we actually want. And I think that, you know, we all say that we'd all like to think of ourselves probably as Guardian readers or read the New Yorker or something, but we all go on Mail Online sometimes, don't we? And see how Demi Moore's knees are holding up. And, you know, if I was going to be in a magazine, which I will be soon, I want to be drawn in Photoshop, you know. And I don't think that you can get away from that. I think it is human nature that we want to see beauty, and it's an ugly part of our human nature that we want to see beauty. Well, maybe, well, no, it's a paradox. You know, you can't, not everything can be perfect, and, you know, life and death and. Well, yeah, we should celebrate it, but not to the point that we are making people feel bad. And I think the difference now is that before, if you lived in a little village, you might have been, you know, really jealous of this one really beautiful person that lived down the road. Whereas now, quick Google search, hot guys, hot girls, you can compare yourself to like the 0.001% of beauty. You know, like the most beautiful people in the world. It's like 10 people that we're all comparing ourselves to. And so I really don't know what the answer is, but I think I see it criticised sometimes because I think that a lot of the trans women that are doing quite well tend to be young trans women that have passing privilege, people like Janet Mark and Laverne Cox and people like that. And it's kind of like, that's the way the media works. It wants people that looks a certain way. So I think we're all collectively part of this, but you're the people that turn on the channel, you're the people that watch the movies. And one final thing, I'm going to finish with a little bit of honesty. I used to think, you know, I want to see all different people doing things. I've got Netflix, right? I don't have a television, but I'll admit to having Netflix. And I watched Wallander recently, and it wasn't the one that's got what's his face in it, the British one. It was is it Swedish or Dutch? I get all those countries confused, but basically it's hideous. And there's this sex scene with it in him, and it's showing him having an orgasm, and I just thought, no, I just want to see really kind of unrealistically attractive people having sex. I don't want to see this anymore. So I put my hands up, and I think we're all part of the problem.
What an interesting note to end on. We're all part of the problem.
I told you it wouldn't get an applause.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for you guys to being here. Thank you to Paris Lees, to Milo Yiannopoulos, to John Amaechi, to Lisa Power, and to Lord Waheed Ali. Thank you for joining us. Next up is the amazing Evan Davis interviewing Paris Lees, who is the #1 most influential LGBT person, according to the Independent on Sunday Pink List last year. Have a fantastic weekend. It's really cool. This event is amazing. I want to say thank you to Tom Guy and all the team who put it together. Those guys work on this for a whole year. They put in so much effort, so please show them some love and have a fantastic weekend. Thank you very much.
That was brilliant, Matthew. Please give it up for Matthew and the panel. Amazing. I really enjoyed that. Can I just say, I would love to have sex in florals. That sounds amazing. Love it. Right, there's loads still to come here today. What I think is really exciting is the Bake Off. You could become the Student Pride Bake Off Champion 2014 later today. John Waite and Zoe Lyons are both here. They're going to be hosting it, and they need you on their team. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up right now, or we'll come and grab you if you don't. So make sure you do that. We're going to fix the furniture, and then coming on next, it's #TimeForTea.